Patrick, Brian, welcome to the Emerging Excellence podcast, and an absolute pleasure to have you with us. For those who are unfamiliar with your background, as a brief intro, you're the chief coach of the Cambridge University Boat Club, specifically the women's program. You've led that team to what I understand to be an unprecedented level of success currently, and we're going to dive into exactly what it takes to build a culture of repeated success at the organisation. You grew up here in beautiful Australia in Adelaide, and we're going to touch on your story and kind of how you ended up in beautiful Cambridge, for which I'm very jealous of all the places that live in the UK. That's it, I reckon. So first of all, Patrick, welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, but thank you for having me. Story. Wow. Grew up in Adelaide, went to started at Glenelg Primary School, then went to Glengarry High School, then some things happened in life, went off to Sweden for a year. My mother's Swedish, so spent time with family over there, and then came back to Adelaide and went to Adelaide High School, which is where I first started rowing. And like many Australians, sport is part of our psyche, and tried pretty much everything. I'm 6'8", so obviously I tried basketball, swimming, all the usuals, but turned out I'm quite flat-footed. So rowing kind of just really from, I'm a big 6'8", but probably a little bit overweight at 17 years old, to just, we as a school only did 7 sessions a week. I went to the boat club in the mornings and taught myself extra sessions. Just fell in love with it. Other than a brief pause while I did my undergrad at Flinders University, I've been rowing for pretty much 34 years involved in the sport. So took the sport quite seriously, fell in love with the concept of the Olympics, and tried to aspire to that. Just burnt out, I guess, in around the 95, and just took a break. Went off, did an undergrad in teaching. And then when I graduated, I moved to, actually I had a teaching job in the US. So I was doing some traveling and was going to just ended up back in the UK, doing some supply teaching, and started rowing again. And so I haven't stopped, really. Just one opportunity came up after another. And rowing in Australia is very small. It's quite a niche sport, probably better known amongst the private schools. Although there are a growing number of state schools, Adelaide High being a state school where I rowed, but actually in Adelaide, there's now 3 state schools that row, last time I checked. And, but over here, it's like, you had the likes of Sturstein and Redgrave, who won 5 gold medals, and are actually almost if anyone knows anything about rowing, they'll go, oh, yeah, is that what Steve did, sort of thing. And fell in love with the sport again. Won a medal at Hemi Royal Regatta, so that allowed me to put that sort of physical side of that and personal interaction with the sport to sleep. And then I moved on I was asked by my club at the time to take over coaching, which was quite a step. I went from being an athlete to running the men's program back then, with about 60 people, having barely coached. Teaching was probably what saved me. And then that began that exploration. Have worked for youth sports charities for a number of years in City London. And then in 2013, the opportunity to sort of go backwards. I knew I needed to go backwards to go forwards. Because I had no one challenging me on my thinking around sport. And Cambridge University, to put it in context, so you would go to any university in the country and maybe to 100 people will row, or really know what the sport really is. within one university. At Cambridge University, and it's pretty much the same at Oxford, it's part of the furniture. So it's like, it's the Aussie rules football of Cambridge.
Yeah.
50% of the student body will have tried this.
Wow.
That's university of 25,000. It's a collegiate school. So there's 31 colleges. They all row, and you can dip it, you can try it. So they know what it is. And the pinnacle of that is rowing, for the university, and the boat race. And, the boat race is shit on the men's side. The boat race is almost as old as Australia. First 50 years. First race was in the late 1820s, 1827, 1829, something like that. And then the women's race started in late 1920s. So I get the two confused, but let's just go with 1927. So, the women's race is coming up to 100 years. The men's race is coming up to 200 years. The men's race, the university race is the oldest collegiate race in the world. I was like, we're fair. I think we're up to 177 races for the men and approaching 80 races for the women. And, when you go back that far, it's like, well, yeah, shouldn't we transport was a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, for sure.
The distances are nothing here compared to us for what Australia is used to traveling, but it's still, where we are in Cambridge is 70 miles to where the race is held. So if you go back to the 1800s, you're like, well, they'll definitely probably using horse and cart, and stuff like that. So it's steeped in history. I was exposed to the first ever boat race by, I did a little bit of coaching when I was taking rowing too seriously, back in the day. And, a guy I was coaching was a judge in Adelaide, and he took me he got his, law degree in Cambridge. And so I went along to this race. I was probably 20 years old. And yet then, almost 20 years later, here I am working there. That was, parallel, the sort of connections that sometimes, was it fortuitous? Was it just coincidence? It's still pretty cool. So when I joined Cambridge, the Cambridge University Boat Club, we had been on a bit of a losing streak. My boss at the time, Rob Baker, who's now in charge of the men, so my counterpart on the men's side, we were the bus 4 or maybe even 5 in a row at that point. And we lost our first race, my first race in 2014. We lost, but that was the last race that was for the women, was the last race held in Henley on Thames. 2000, and the point and the purpose of me being hired and funding being equal across the men and the women was that the race was going to move to the Tideway, which is where the men's race is held, in London from Putney to Mortlake. And, as like I'd watched the race, I'd been to the race a few times by then. And I never, when I arrived in the UK, did I have on my mind that I was going to be walking out on that stage, but opportunities come along. You're in the right place at the right time. Like being stubborn and not having, I can tell you that my salary is fine now, but I hadn't had a pay rise. Actually, as a teacher, as a rowing coach, I was earning, for most of my rowing career, I was earning less than I was as a first year teacher. But luckily enough, and I have a loving partner. We don't have children, so it was about pursuing our passions. So that gave us the opportunity and the thing to be where we are today. And so we've both gone through different careers to get here.
So I'm curious, Pat, let's pick up the story in terms of coming in, you're a losing team, let's just say. And I guess the nature of university rowing is that it's kind of replenished, or there's quite some natural attrition, as you might call it. in a corporate context, just given people graduating, etc. In terms of that, we're curious in terms of how did you think about building this kind of winning mentality? Because, if you Google your name, you come across the Guardian article. That's how I came across you early this year. And I initially, read about how you embedded a culture of caring, right? Specifically, people looking out for each other, which in a sporting context, I've spoken to lots of different professional coaches, and care is certainly like an underlying one, but it's not typically how most people, I think, would describe a high performance environment. So what were you intentional about when you started to go into this team? You're seeing existing performance. What did you start to go, okay, we need to do X?
I think, so there's a couple of reasons. So the other thing that's different about the boat race is that, so you have your undergrads come in, which is the typical, model. You come from school or you come from college, you've learned about the sport as a young person, the 18 years old. The thing that's quite unique about the boat race is that, every 4 years after Olympics, you can have Olympians turn up and who want to do like a year, sometimes longer, but a year where they're basically re-engaging with learning and stuff because they see the next step going into the corporate world or back into learning and stuff. And, they've been full-time athletes for many years. So it's an opportunity for them to really, and so you've got, you've got these huge experiences of talent and experience and world views and expertise. Some of these 18-year-olds are phenomenal in, say, computer science or something like that. But then you've got these athletes they have to be quite intelligent, book smart, world smart. Probably they have to be on the cutting edge of thinking and learning and studious to be able to get into Cambridge. It's it's one of the hardest institutions in the world to get into. And so they come up with sort of this intelligence, but these women come with also this, they've done the lessons of, of learning to fail and how that's helped them move forward. And I think that's really where it came about. It's in the beginning, we had a very collegiate base. They'd all come through Cambridge and they'd failed, but they had no one. We didn't really have anyone who knew how to win. And so in Daphne Marchenko and Ashton Brown were probably the first two real athletes that come from US universities that both had under 23 experience on the international stage, and they ignited that sort of, that's how you do it type thing. And then we also had, we had this young woman called Imogen Grant who came on the scene, and Imogen had no rowing. I think she's about to go to a second Olympics. We taught her to row. So we just, these women are driven. They come from, yes, quite a few of them come from quite privileged backgrounds, but there's also, we do have some state scholars. We do have, this is cutting edge sport. The only thing that is taken more seriously is in Olympics. They're all amateurs. So they're doing 20 plus hours on top of full-time students. They have to be pretty driven, and they fall over regularly.
In what sense? Is it they fall off the bandwagon?
No, helping them learn that it's okay to fail has actually been linked, because they're not used to failing. They're book smart. They are perfectionists, and actually perfectionism, while in some quarters is aspirational, when it comes down to well-being and mental health, it ain't great. So learning to balance those things out. And I think, getting to the crux of where caring comes from, what it took me was to trust that they were there for the same reasons I were. We were there to win together, or to do the best we possibly could, to go as fast as we possibly could. And I worked, it was actually, I'm a fairly empathetic, according to my the latest profile. I'm the extreme on the empathy side of things, but what really turned things out was we're just scrolling through Instagram or something, and I came across this little article. It was actually about a Kiwi professional rugby player, and he used the word care as a way of, I can't remember, I've even tried to find it, I can't find the thing, but so this professional rugby player was talking about, in his team, they talked about caring. And if I care about my teammates, I'm more likely to, when I'm knocked down, get up. And where that starts to make a difference is when everyone's tired, fatigued in that third, fourth quarter. And it's like my ability to get up and not let my teammates down and things like that was just like, yes, that is exactly what I want to create. I want to create an environment where they want to do it for each other. Rowers tend to do it for each other, but they actually like taking it another level of being supportive, being like, hey, this is how, yes, sometimes you have to go down the line. It's like, that's not how we do things. But more often than not, if we create this environment where they all lead by example, not just thing, that we then create an environment where they push each other to be better. And then, the 51-year-old male, I guide, I provide the tools, I do provide correction, and I do certainly can be a hard ass if I need to be. But what I'm trying to do is actually like steer, or my wife used to be a dog trainer, and she used to use the word shaping behavior. Interesting. That's always struck me as quite a nice way of like, they know where they want to go. They just need they need that help, that assistance to get there and to steer them around the obstacles. And that can be providing, we were lucky enough to work with Grace Prendergast a couple of years ago, who was at the time the fastest, she held 3 world records, in our sport, which is just in the sweep discipline, there are only 3 events. Right. There's the pair, the 4 and the 8. She held records in all of them. Wow. Of course, the Tokyo Olympics, she lost 2 of them, but she still holds the record for the women's pair. And if anyone breaks that anytime soon, it'd be amazing. It's just like it's on a different level. So it's like that Australian 1500 meter runner, whose name escapes me at the moment, Hill, who just broke the world record by 5 seconds in a 1500.
I missed that.
Wow. Probably a good medal for Australia at Paris, but so where that's the underpinning of care is, it's about shaping the behavior because no one does this. No one does 20 hours of training on top of a full-time academic schedule if you're not driven to do it.
That's interesting, right? Because the parallel here, or where I'm coming from, largely speaking, is we specialize in construction and infrastructure, right? And I think high performance in that sector, or being specifically a leader, does require extra effort. There's the base, what you're expected to do, what's on your job description. And then the next is an additional requirement. And I think it's very tricky if you're a director, a leader, or a senior person in a business like that, trying to get people to tap into that. So I'm just curious, within a Cambridge context, half the population of the university have done rowing. So you've got a significantly interesting pool. People go to Cambridge to do rowing, right, and to compete. Do you think outside of a highly competitive, you could say, like you're at the elite of the elite in some capacity. So it's like you're pulling from an already really heavy base. Do you think you could relate care and this kind of ordeal into a quote unquote normal team?
I guess, I would like to think yes. I appreciate you're always going to have your outliers, and we have our outliers, and they just like, the context for us is that we are select, it's like anyone can walk through the door, but and that starts at 1st of September. Anyone can walk through the door wanting to do it, but the reality is by Christmas, I will only have 32 people. And that's across our three boats that we need to develop with a couple of spares around that. But, and so you're going to have people who want to just do the job, and that's okay. You want to create an environment, like I think through an environment of care, they can turn up and go, yeah, I'm going to turn up. And if you respect them, they'll do their job and they'll leave at the end of the day. But if you create them an environment where there's an opportunity for them to show you how things can be done better, then you're empowering them. And, I think there's a growing evidence when you talk, you can watch TED Talks and stuff, and, people who've come through that environment have gone, I empowered my employees to do this, and actually they increased retention and thing. And, money is always going to be a factor, but if, how people choose to run their businesses is up to them. But, none of my athletes get paid. So, I don't have to worry about that one.
So let's break this down. Right? So anyone can walk through the door 1st of September. They've got, what's that? September, October, November, December. So 4 months and you said by January, they're going to be down to 32. Is that right?
Yeah. So we'll have 3 8s, which is 24, plus 3 full coxes, who are the steers, the drivers of the boats in the thing. And then we'll have approximately 6 spares. There's like, if I'm struggling to define between, it might be 1 or 2, but that's essentially it. Yeah.
Roughly speaking. And so they come in, as I understand it, you're asking the teams to help create the environment that they want, or they get to say what the culture will be. Just talk us through that and talk us through it specifically. I can imagine as I did when I was listening to the podcast, which I heard you been on recently, I kind of sat there, kind of shuddered a little bit, because there's always the concern that if you give autonomy away, they might come back with quote unquote the wrong answer. And, so I'm curious, how do you navigate that? And how do you, wrong in this context, meaning it becomes too soft, maybe, where, elite or high performance is where you naturally push through boundaries or seek innovation or something like that.
Or the words I personally hate, too liberal or too woke. I can't stand those words, but define woke in the dictionary. It's like people doing nice things for each other. But anyway, that's it. In the conversation, we have student leaders within the group. So, and they're elected by their peers. So I challenge those elected leaders. Look, like over the course of this season, you're going to need to do between 4 and 6 workshops. You're going to, that first workshop will involve, you coming together with it's like, how are we going to behave? How are we going to talk to each other? Comes on behavior, but what's our aspiration for this season? And those headings are pretty predictable, and what the athletes want to put in there is pretty reasonably predictable. I mean, I could show you multiple mission statements the athletes have created over the years where the variation is very little, but it's about, I heard of reference recently, it's like the one and done. It's like, well, this is how we're going to be, and then it's done, and that's how everyone has to go off. And it's like, no, that's not reality. So by doing these workshops over the course, the first one will be in September, the last one will be sort of January, February, and then the student leaders will produce a mission statement, which is a small part of it, but it's something that they can go hold on and say, actually, this is what we created. But it's the conversations along the way that help ensure that we are keeping the end product in our minds.
Yep.
And how we want to have those tough conversations. We have to have tough conversations because, it could be, someone talking, down the program or down their teammates in the changing rooms. And if someone needs to be able to empower to challenge that, like, I can't be everywhere. my assistant can't be everywhere. So we have to create an environment where we identify how we're going to be aiming for the same end product. And, I think in showing anyone the respect of this is your journey, is as much as it is mine. Someone asked me, it's like, how do you keep motivation going? It's like, well, if I lost the race, no one would think worse of me, because they'll go, well, look how many he's won. So it's not about that. It's about being like providing these young women with a framework, with a thing to see what they're capable of doing, and realizing that all we expect is the best they can be on that day, not someone else's idea of what is perfect. And if I lead everything, then it's my idea of what's perfect, which they're always going to fall short of. Because every time I see an improvement, my bar moves, and that's exhausting. So it's exhausting for them. It's exhausting for me. So it's like, but by being this coach who it's working at, I'm not saying I've got this all right, but listening to podcasts, doing podcasts where I get to talk about it, just sort of gets me to continue to explore how I want to facilitate this space. Don't think what I'm doing is unique. I do think that those of us doing it are in the minority. But I think it comes down to trusting, in my case, the athletes, in your industry, trusting your employees that actually, I think we all want to do something that we're proud of at the end of the day, providing a space where we can do that.
So it sounds like then you see the ownership piece, which would be quite, let's say, it's very powerful, like giving people the autonomy to create something like that. That gives them ownership, that gives them also the buy-in that they are to self-correct if they see behavior which doesn't align with, the agreed destination, as it were. I'm curious just on that quote where, so you said there, it's not about being perfect, it's more about being the best you can be on the day or something along those lines. So it's a big difference then if you contrast perhaps an Alex Ferguson as an example. He would be a standout in terms of probably a contrarian to that view, Pat. Would that be what you'd, is that fair? I
don't think there's an athlete of Ferguson's who talks badly. Well, very few who talk badly about Ferguson. I think that's because actually what he did was he spotted talent, sure, and he created an environment to bring in talent. But while he did do correction, it was one of the more nerve-wracking, but talent grace Prendergast, that's not actually how we were going to do things. Was an interesting day in my career. Quite a memorable one. Where am I going to go with this? Sorry, my brain's jumped around a million places. Can you ask that question again?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's good. So you've talked about care let me do that again. You've talked about care from creating of the care piece, or that giving your athletes the autonomy to almost create this mission statement, this kind of, what is the status quo here? How are we going to do business? How are we going to compete? How are we going to train? There was a specific phrase you used in there which related to not necessarily being the best or perfect or something like that, but much more about doing the best on the day that you possibly can. So just talk about, that seems quite different to maybe what's seen as quite a hard-assed approach. Alex Ferguson would be a good Pommy context. People who are really pushing for quote unquote an unachievable standard, maybe, and that's why they do so good. So, how do you think about that?
I think that being the best, if you create an environment where people are trying to be the best they can be, then they are, in their reflections, in their preparation, they are thinking about that positive self-talk, that positive, like, okay, these are going to be my goals. If they have a goal imposed upon them that could be exactly the same, they are thinking about, I better not, oh shit, how am I going to achieve this? It's that there's small differences, but one's negative, one's positive. One's aspiring, one's, it's fear-led. And we can go down this sort of generational sort of things, but I think there are so many things going on in the world today, and just even in social media, where we're pointing out where people don't match up. We're creating this perfect image of what we should be aspiring to, and it's hitting them every single side. Whether it's we're just talking about mental health more now, or whether it's a thing, or look, I was in my late 40s. I have a 20-acre farm. COVID didn't really hurt me that badly. That was, it was an opportunity to work around the house and stuff like that. But some of these kids were locked in bedrooms, learning online, and they did it for long periods of time. And on the world view, and every country had a different, but some of these kids were in their rooms on their own, and their only contact was through this thing. So, trying to relate to that is not, I decided I just wasn't going to. What I was going to do is continue to provide an opportunity for them to talk about and explore and to catch up. We have a race plan, and even in that race plan, we talk about, we don't talk about, right, got to do this. We talk about creating an environment of positive self-talk where that's what we're going to aspire to do. So it's just changing the direction. It's not, it's no different to, so Alex Ferguson was the pinnacle of his generation. And I just think that and I think he could do that because he had trust. So, they did trust him after his success. There is no one the importance of trust. And I certainly had trust in terms of having won as many races as I've won, and and I'm the third coach, who's I've been there the whole time where we've been winning, but I am the third coach in a row that has been winning. So it's not just, I've come into a leadership position while winning and have managed to keep that going. And, I'd love to keep winning. That's a pretty privileged place to be. But I think underpinning a bit of a large part of where, we talked about mindfulness and not mindfulness, but well-being sector. And it's can you imagine? So we've been winning the women's blue boat have not lost the race since 2017. We've set two record times in that period. We had some astounding people, and there's an element of people who turn up to this club going, well, I want to be the next person to win. And if we don't have something bigger going on than just winning or losing, these are amateur athletes, they're young people, they're exposed to, there are 6 million people over the course of who've watched this year's race, all over the world. They get interviewed, then, it's not a big pool context, but in terms of the rowing world, it's fairly big.
Yeah.
That first crew that loses, it's got to be out something more than just winning or losing. They're going to be distraught. either way. But if it's just about, oh, we lost, we're not good enough, and all that
So
stuff,
you talk,
then yeah, and you're going to be pretty shit day.
so are you talking about that as being focused too much on, let's say, that specific outcome rather than the betterment of ourselves or the betterment of the sporting reputation? Or how do you think about that when results in your world is measured off, rightly or wrongly, probably how you perform once a year or something? Is that right?
Yeah, and the record books will only look at, it doesn't matter if I win by 1 foot and I've won by 39 seconds, which is in our sport a very long way. The record books only show win or loss. But on our wall, on the men's side, there's 180 races now, and it just has win or lose. Women's race has, has 80, let's say 80 races, and it only has win or lose. So the history books are the history books, and in some ways, it's thankful. It's a small sport in the context of things, but it is an Olympic sport, etc. So it has your name on the wall. Like, I'm an employee, my name doesn't appear anywhere. So it's just I appear in maybe a Wikipedia page in terms of the history or something like that, but I'm not actually a member of the club. I'm staff. It's like, and that has its own place in history, et cetera, et cetera. But I mentioned that I'm quite empathetic. Like, I have, sometimes it's quite a lot of the time it's a blessing. And I think coaching, women at this period in time, it's quite a strength, but it also is a bit of a curse. It means I do question myself a bit. Maybe some would say too much, but I'm gaining confidence in myself in that space, in the trusting these athletes to do the right thing. And for those of you who go back and watch this year's race, it was one of the ones I'm most proud of. Because it didn't have any superstars in there, and the opposition had had incredible athletes with big winning experience, and we didn't have a great start, but we just held to this concept of trusting each other and listening to our cops and doing exactly what they said. But there was unbelievable trust in our sport. Where the smallest movement that's out of time adds to the overall weight, so adds to fatigue in terms of things. And this year's race, because of land, water, and the environment, etc., it was a 21. It's the longest race. It's the slowest winning time ever. Right. And they're down. This is a race that traditionally you would say by the time they're at that first big marker, they call the milepost, or a mile into the race, whoever's in front of them. And that has been the case for the last decade. We're down by almost a length. And then over the course of the next 10 minutes or 8 minutes, we rode back level and then through, and then just keep going. And that is a testament to their trust in one another, their belief in the hard work, them listening to that. Actually, no one went, oh shit, we're down, I'm going to go on my own, or did extra. They just stuck with, this is what I know I can do. And they did it together. And it was just one of the most, somewhat stressful, I admit, because you have no control. I have no control at all on the race day. It was just one of the most, I could leave the sport now and just be like, wow, what an impact I've made. It was pretty epic.
How do you do that? How do you build that? It certainly sounds like getting them on board with a clear vision.
Yep.
What are the other, if you had to say it in 20 words, Pat, what would be the 5 things, 6 things? What's the Pat formula?
The Pat formula. Wow. In 20 words. Not my strength, 20 words. There we go. Environment, to trust in each other, creating an
Sorry, mate.
environment where they can.
Your microphone ducked down for a second. Say again. So environment.
Okay. Creating an environment where trust and care, love for one another is the thing that takes them to somewhere they've never been. You don't do things you don't go to some pretty dark places, which is where if you're at maximum effort, you're down, and you have like the ability to just keep going and trust in what you're doing. Just, body language, everything, just like no one dropped their shoulders. It was just trust, and which is one of the cornerstones of care or love, whatever. But the training program works. The things that I'm in charge of, that I have full control over, and I asked to do, just not easy, but I asked them to tick all these boxes and create that thing. And, there's, only of those 9 women who won on that day, 2 of them came from the US and had rowed for a number of years. Yeah. A couple of them had learned to row, but had been part of our program for a number of years. And the other 4 stepped up. 3 of them learned to row at the university. And that's, we've had the odd one, but to have 3 in one boat, it was, one is now a doctor, she's a medical doctor. She was doing it in her last year of medical studies. The other 2 were, actually, one of them was also a medical student. The other one was scientist. They're all first class students at the top of their courses. It was 4 undergrads. It was just surreal in terms of what we achieved that day. I actually always believed it was, hadn't quite realized that we'd been written off. We were the massive underdogs. I'm like, okay, there you go. And we were the underdogs because people took snapshots. People took, on this day, oh, it's like, oh, look at them going, oh, these things aren't very good. It's like, well, okay, but you don't actually know where they are in the big picture of things. You don't know where, you're going to break shit to make it, to move forward. You've got to, move backwards to move forwards. And, if we keep just piling new things on top of weak foundations, well, shit falls over. It's not a construction analogy. But yeah, I talk about foundations all the time. It's like in the way we move, actually the middle of our body is our foundation for everything. And that's true for baseball. That's true for every sport. It's like, it's the bit that connects our legs to our hands. And rowing is this bizarre, unique sport where essentially, to put it into the thing, you're going into a deep squat and then jumping. You just, in a boat race, you're doing it 700 times weighted. You're taking sort of 40 kilos on a dumbbell and you got to do 700 something squat jump. And you got to do it together. Yeah. Yeah, they're sat down. But yeah, you got to do it together. So that's the beauty of the sport, I guess. But yeah, so you've got building that was pretty cool.
Great building analogy. Word count, you've gone slightly over. So you've got creating an environment of trust. Really looking, I guess, the fundamentals of kind of the training program. I like the break stuff to move things forward. And then, is there any more you'd add in just in terms of building that really cohesive team that you see?
Powering, so it's, it's the tradition of the race and all those things, but you've got to empower these young people to believe that they can do it. You know, the Olympians come in with the belief that they can do it when they turn up, but you've got to creating an environment where an 18-year-old who's never done a sport can go, okay, I can achieve this.
How are you doing that? Because that is really curious, especially you've also done it at a repeated level with this 3, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, if you go back to 10 years, it's more than that, but I honestly don't know. I think it's the nature of our race. This race is that you always have the things like Cambridge University on the women's side, and on the men's side too, but on the women's side has a long history of producing Olympians and people who learned to row at the university. So there's an element of, these women come in, they're high, they create high standards for themselves. And I think rowing is one of these sports where you can come into it later on than traditional sports. You would never turn up and probably think, yeah, I can be a professional footballer at 19 years old, but you can, 19, 20, you can do it in rowing. You need to have, an underlying physiology, whether that comes from martial arts or, incredible proprioception, or swimming where you've got an incredible engine, or, and there's lots of stories like that. But so it's a unique in that you can come into this sport later on in your development and achieve Olympic success or boat race success. And a bit like me, it's like suddenly there's a sport here that it just makes sense. And you just fall in love with it, and you fall in love with the movement patterns, working with teammates, and a lot of things where you have a good day at work, and it's like actually what was underpinning. It's like actually I got on really well with my teammates. Everything sort of just gelled, and we're in the zone. And I don't think, I believe that I can get in the way of that sometimes. So trying to create an environment, different triggers. I will go down and help out we lift 3 times a week. We call it strength and conditioning here, but we lift 3 times a week, and I rarely interfere with that. That's their environment, their space. I'm asking women to embrace being strong and powerful when the rest of the world is telling them to be skinny and blah, blah, blah. So I want them to have loud music. I want them to have, be cheering each other on when they're doing, they're catching themselves and lifting more. And I never, something I've learned is that I never want to be the bloke who walks in and goes, well, you do that and makes them do this, because actually that's just devaluing. Reality is men are physically stronger, but I could tell you that some of these women, wow, they lift as much as the men's team, because they create an environment where they're striving for technical expertise. They're striving for wanting to be the best versions of themselves, and they're not, and they're seeing pleasure in the weight room. I think it's really cool.
You're really tapping into then intrinsic motivators in terms of, is what you're saying, right? So a lot of that from with kind of layer across the leadership lens would be looking at intrinsic motivators, staying away. How do you empower? How do you maybe, it sounds like, normalize that at Cambridge we become Olympians? It's like, this is how it's done here. It's by association, even if you started last week or you start, there's still that at Cambridge, this is the way. It sounds like I interviewed a guy called David Horrocks, who he former high performance coach at Man U, and they talk about the Manchester United way, and I love that as an idea, right? And I think a lot of companies could really borrow that, and having that really clear identity about how business gets done here, and that allows people, because often, maybe we could kind of steer the end of the conversation to this bit, is like, and this actually speaks to learning that mistakes are okay, because we see a lot of people in our worlds, technically, they've done very well. They're engineers, they're smart peeps that they've even got to this point. But transitioning into a leadership role, it actually, is a humbling pursuit often, requires humility. You don't want to be necessarily the leader who's the smartest guy in the room or the smartest gal, because that can be off-putting. So how do you have them transition or embrace failure or embrace mistakes that, because it would be, I think that specifically could relate really quite well across into what we see an ongoing challenge in this space, especially in a leadership space where you're now just developing a different talent or a different capability.
Yeah, I think, the reality is we talked earlier about how, I'll start with any number of athletes, the highest number, I think it's 60 that we've had turn up, and, that by Christmas are going to be 32. So there is an element of like, well, if I fail, I'm going to be kicked out. And actually it's like, no, these are the circumstances where, there'll be, you continue while you're not, but these are the spaces where you'll be celebrated for giving something a go, because this is actually going to make a bigger impact. So, I'm going, like, this coming year, I'm going to be even more deliberate. It's like, today I expect there will be no recording of the results other than you recording your own, but I want you to go out and fail. And it is going to be, it's a hard workout, and I want you to test something. I want you to like go too far. In other sessions, I am quite structured in terms of like, this is the point where you go intense. This is the point where you stride down onto a more sustainable pattern and things, and teaching them how physiology works, because emotions, unfortunately, get in the way. This feels great. I'm just going to keep, there you go. So, they can understand things intellectually, but when the emotion comes in there or feelings come in there, suddenly they're doing the wrong thing. So, there is deliberate creation of opportunities to fail, and one of the things I'm going to be trying to do even better this year is celebrating those failures. Like, hey, we wanted, like, hey, you had a go at this and you failed, and that's okay. Well done. Because up until this point, you did this, and what did you learn about this at this point? And sharing those lessons with each other so that they can go there. And I think while you were talking, actually, the other thing that we do really well is we bring in alumni who have gone through this process, and actually the author of the Guardian article gives an alumnus, Kath Bishop. Be honest, it's one of the reasons I got read, because she's an incredible woman who's written the Long Win, a book called The Long Win, which is, like, I would recommend anyone read, because it's about, it's shaped a lot of this thinking as it is. Yeah, I don't know. The alumni can tell the story and give it legitimacy. This is where I was. This is where I got to. These are the lessons I learned along the way, and they're real, because they're closer to peers. They're women, and they can show what's possible, rather than the head coach who didn't go to the university, doesn't have a Cambridge degree, is a bloke. And, those, I can empathize, but I have not lived their lives.
Yeah.
So creating a real way is like reminding them what is possible, because the world is telling them that, and their own heads are telling them that it's not. So, and it's those ones who can go, well, why not me? And I think in the real world, I think that's an opportunity. It's like, bring someone in who's gone from, being on the floor, as it were, that the grunt work all the way through, and was able to tell their story and show what this, what lessons they learned, how they were exposed to this, and that brought them to the next level. And then, maybe they're owning their own company at one point, and how the support they got. My brother's a professional sailor and went from being, just a grunt on the side of a boat to the captain of one of the most famous yachts in the world. So one of the famous old yachts in the world. It's storytelling from people who live those experiences. I think a friend in the marketing world said it's about telling stories, and he's 100% right. It's like, our season is a story. What's going to be our story? What are going to be the lessons? What's going to be the last chapter, where everything's wrapped up into a lovely bow?
Yeah, really powerful. I want to round out the conversation, Pat, with your own performance. Actually, you're an expert in getting other people to perform. That's what you get paid for. I'm curious, an old mentor of mine always used to ask the question, who motivates the motivator? And I'm curious for you, like, how do you think about that, and how do you approach that to keep pushing, to keep hungry, to keep an edge, or what does that look like?
Yeah. Really interesting thing. I've just hit 51. Most of my working week is getting up at 5 a.m. and getting home at around 7:30. Certainly in the busy parts of the season, it's full occupancy. And one of the things that when I was the assistant coach under Rob Baker was that, we bring in guest coaches, and now being in charge, I can decide who those guest coaches are. And there's so I realized, I think one of the older you get, the more you realize the less you know. And there's always something else to learn. And learning that it's all right to make mistakes, learning that to say, I don't know. I do have some role models that I aspire to, but actually my happy place, or one of my happy places, but most of it in my working life, is actually being on the water, watching those athletes, learn and go fast or get faster, and and tinker and explore. And it's since I've been in charge in that first year, like, one of the things that really sunk home was that women are, the outcomes that we want for women, absolutely the same as we want. We want them to go as fast as possible, but they're not built the same. And so, to quote Dr. Stacey Sims, he said this in a physiology context, women are not small men. And I am working on expanding that into, these built pretty much every piece of equipment that we use was built for men and then downsized for women. From the rowing machine that most people avoid in the gym, is built for a 6'3", 90 kilo man. The mechanics of it are built. And it's like, there are definitely lots of different builds for men too. So it's not a thing, but the power makeup of women is different to men. So, the upper body strength thing. So, working, I was like, okay, well, how do we change things to allow women to tap into where their strengths are, rather than going, oh, well, you're not as strong. So, I think that's exploring stuff, talking to people about stuff. I I mean, having articles written about me, getting to talk on podcasts, these are all things that are fairly new to me. So, there's lots of things that are motivating me to just be really passionate about what I get to do. And, took a long time to get here. So yeah, I don't know what's next, but I'm going to keep enjoying it while the ride lasts.
Yeah.
I appreciate the uniqueness of what I get to do.
For sure. Well, Pat, it's been a fascinating insight into your world, one of which is kind of a weirdly obsessive one, which I can't imagine too many people would get up and to describe their happy place, freezing cold on a Cambridge waterway at 5 o'clock in the morning or 5:30. It's, and let's say probably 9 months a year, 10 months a year, or whatever it might look like. It's, pretty brutal, some of the pommy winters there. So, a huge thanks. Obviously, Adelaide climate treated you well or kind of prepared you well, but I think some fascinating insights, especially around like building. I'm not sure if you want to call it the PAT framework, or the PAT formula, but I think there's some that empowering piece and then embracing the alumni. I feel like that legitimacy word is probably one which we should highlight just in terms of this conversation, is like giving legitimacy to whatever you're doing, of the people you're trying to bring on board, persuade. I'm thinking about when we work with these emerging leaders, some of what the research says is that often they get paired with a senior exec. And it's actually one of the worst ways, or can often be demotivating, to be paired with someone so high lofty. It can actually be more powerful to put them with someone who's slightly above, but very much far more relatable. And that probably speaks quite well to your legitimacy piece there, in terms of making it believable that their progress, right? And that kind of speaks to that even a newbie could go on to win the boat race. So, Pat, thank you so much for taking the time out. We wish you all the very best with this year. I hope good luck for your continued success. But I'm also curious as to when you have a higher purpose, whether maybe even it's not all about winning after all. What would you care to say on that last bit there?
I think, I think things that have taught me is like, I've had my opportunities where I felt like a failure. When I walked away from the sport the first time, I felt like a complete failure. I've not achieved my goal of making the Olympic team or representing Australia. And then you look back and then you just go, actually, this is what I, somewhat plump 17-year-old. And now I'm, who can barely bench press 20 kilos like back then, bench pressing 100 kilos and, just being, it's appreciating all the small things. That the winning is wonderful, an incredible experience. And none of them are like better than the others. They're just different, the difference. And each story is different. Each journey will meet some pretty special people along that way. I'm going to 2 weddings this year of athletes I've coached. And it's like, the winning is a moment. The story, the journey, the shared experiences, they shape you or leave you a better person or leave me a better person. So, and you know what? Having won as much as we've won gives us a lot of freedom to talk about these sort of things and to be able to explore in towns. Like if we were repeatedly losing, then my job would be on the line, and I probably wouldn't have the courage to be exploring the space, because I'd be like, actually, we've got to be doing things better and stuff. So I'm very thankful for the trust that my employer gives me in terms of being able to sort of explore different things and do all of that sort of stuff. And, hopefully it pays off going forward, but I appreciate how fragile it is.
It's a great place to leave the discussion. Patrick, thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.